Stan with 3D PT. About 3 years ago, I made this Hourglass timer with a 3D printed joint and two fruit jars. And this has held up for over 3 years, being in classrooms. And time-wise, it does come out to about a 10-minute timer. So I'm going to go through how to make the joint for this. And then we'll glue it together. So right now this is version 1, and here's version 2. It's going to have a couple rubber bands for a gasket seal. I'm going to make one timer with these two jars, and then another one with these two. So I'm going to run an experiment, but I think if this takes 10 minutes, these smaller ones, which are half pint jars, should take about 5 minutes. So I'm going to double check that before I glue it all together. So for this project, you'll need the two jars, a 3D printed joint, which I'll actually sell on my TeacherPayTeachers site, and fine sand. So you want to go and find the finest sand you could get at the hardware store. And I think this is what they use to make like fine cement countertops with. You could buy it, unfortunately, you could buy it in 40-pound bags, and I've broken it down to a smaller bag here. You'll also need some clear silicone waterproof sealant. So I'd actually buy it in a smaller tube like this if you're not planning on doing a lot with it. Because if you buy a big tube, you're gonna probably not you're probably gonna waste some of it. You'll also need some sort of sieve or sifter. Finest one you can get. Because we want to make sure that the sand doesn't have any clumps in it before it goes into the jar. So I did a couple experiments. These half pint jars come in at about 3 minutes, but I also have these smaller quarter pint jars, and just running those, these come in at about 2.5 minutes, which is kind of interesting because I think for half the time I would lose, or half the size I would lose half time. And in doing the research on what determines that time rate is actually the flow rate. So if the flow is the same, it's really not going to make much of a difference in these two sizes, which is kind of interesting. But I think just for what I'm using these timers for, they're classroom timers, I'd rather have a nice bigger grip on them. So I'm going to go ahead and glue these two together. And then these two. This one I'll probably do later, maybe. But yeah, I'll print up another neck if I want to do that. And actually using these rubber bands as seals works pretty good. The first one I used a 2-part epoxy, and it worked okay, but it's a little too liquid. And it didn't make the greatest seal, so when I started using it, all the sand you could kind of see here in the neck, some sand leaked out. So it was just kind of a pain in the butt. And it took a little while for all the sand to seal in. So when you put these together, you notice that there's a measurement mark on one side of the jar. And to be really kind of picky and annoying, I'm going to make sure that those marks line up, and that'll serve as your countdown, so that way you can see the measurements here to here. And with these particular bell jars, the label for the front lines up. There's nothing on this side, the purple one, which is kind of interesting. The blue one has labels on that side. And yes, these are commemorative jars from the 100th anniversary of Bell. Please don't send me an email asking me for these or making an offer. I'm going to keep these. But I'll go ahead and use that silicone as to seal this up. Try and do this one-handed. So that's probably a little too much. Yeah. That's way too much. I just needed you want to come to just below the rim like you were canning something with this in real life. So I'll pour some of that back. So once you have it filled, again, you want to leave a little bit of you need to leave a little bit of headspace. So about a 1/4 inch below the rim. And for right now, I'm just going to do a dry fit. So I'm using some rubber bands here to do the seal. Get that to a nice snug fit. And then I'll do the time run. So again, when you fill this up, you want to leave some headspace here. So just like you leave headspace when you can food, you want to leave some headspace for between the neck and the base level of the sand. So I went to just about where the top of the neck starts to curve in to the jar. And I also used a brush to really brush off all the sand from all the testing. So I'm going to double check the fit. Make sure I can press it all the way down. And again, the level will be marked up here. So with that, I'll prepare this and glue it together. So definitely put down a nice bead of silicone all the way around, and I'm using clear silicone just so it kind of highlights it. I had some brown silicone, but that was gonna look bad, so I'll go ahead and put this together now. And just give it a little twist just to get it to really seal in. And then I'll seal up the top one. Mistake I made on this, apply the silica to the joint, not to the jar. I put it on the inside bead of the blue jar up here, and that left a couple little blobs. And I did try and clean them off the best I can, but didn't do a great job. So I'll let those harden as is. Not worth going back. So just apply some like right along the top of this edge and this edge here. So once they're glued, put some weight on top. So just like a can of nuts or bolts or something. And something a student pointed out is that on these particular half pint jars, they are tapered. And in this case, it's just touching where it starts to taper here, so that's putting a little bit of gap there. So watch out for that in your design if you use a half pint jar like this, but for the full pint jars, works just fine. So just put some more weights on top. And so I'm going to let this set. The instructions say it's about 2 hours till it's hard. So let it dry overnight. And you can see the seal that's created between the rubber bands and the silica. You can't see any of the silica at all, which is great. And once it cures, any sand will get caught on top and be ready to go.